is part 2 of the integumentary system. Get this slideshow in place. This is the slide that we left off with, where we were talking about epidermal ridges and dermal papilla. And what you can see here is the epidermis and the dermis have been separated from each other for the purposes of showing you the epidermal ridges. So I'm going to circle the epidermal ridges. They project downward. And then the dermal papilla project upward into the epidermis. And they interlock. And then before we go any further into the layers of the epidermis, something that I forgot to mention to you is for you, there's a couple of mnemonic devices that can help you remember the layers of the epidermis. One is come, let's get some beers. And I'm not writing beers because I like this next word better, just because my family is a fishing family. Freshwater, saltwater, we don't care. So I like come, let's get some bait. But whichever one works for you, and that would be from superficial to deep. And so that would go with stratum corneum, and this is for thick skin, stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, that is supposed to be a U, I'm sorry, and stratum spinosum, and then stratum basale, which of course we can also call stratum germinativum. Now, another mnemonic device, if you want to go from the deep layers to the superficial layers, is before signing, get legal counsel. I also like that one for a lot of personal reasons, but before signing, get legal counsel. That would go with before signing, get legal counsel. And once you learn those layers, you just have to remember that to take out lucidum, if it is thin skin, lucidum is only for thick skin. Now, after new cells form in the stratum basale, they migrate toward the skin surface, starting with the stratum spinosum, then the granulosum, then the lucidum. The stratum spinosum is called spinosum because under a microscope it appears to have spines. In the stratum spinosum, cells may continue to divide, so the cells are still living, but the cells are keratinocytes that are held together by desmosomes. And there are branched dendritic cells, and dendritic cells are branching cells that phagocytize germs, pathogens, anything that could harm you before it goes deeper into your skin. And after the stratum spinosum, you would enter the stratum granulosum. It's called granulosum because under the microscope it appears grainy. Here the cells have stopped dividing and started making keratin. Keratin is a protein that coats the surface of skin, and it also forms the hair and the nails. And if this is thick skin, you will then have, as you go toward the surface, you will then have the stratum lucidum, which is called lucidum because the layer is clear. It is composed of flattened, densely packed cells filled with keratin. And then the stratum corneum, which contains the largest number of cells, contains 15 to 30 layers of flattened dead cells packed with keratin. And we call them keratinized or cornified for that reason. And the reason that skin is generally shed in large groups or sheets, even dandruff is a sheet of skin cells. It's not a single skin cell, it's many, many skin cells. But if a person is sunburned, particularly people with lighter skin, when a person gets sunburned, that skin will shed, often in large sheets, where you can kind of peel off the outer layer of the skin, and that is because of the strong connections between the skin called desmosomes. It usually takes 7 to 10 days. I usually say 2 weeks just to keep it simple, but it's really 7 to 10 days for cells to move from the stratum basale to the stratum corneum. And during that process, the cells fill with keratin and die. Then the dead cells stay in the stratum corneum for 2 more weeks before being shed or washed away. So it can take 3 weeks or a little over 3 weeks for a single layer of cells to be completely shed from your body. Hold on, there might have been one good. This is a good question. I've seen a few movies where criminals did this. So some criminals sand their fingertips to avoid leaving recognizable fingerprints. Would this practice permanently remove fingerprints, and why or why not? It would depend on how far down they sand their fingertips. If they were to take a scalpel and actually cut off the skin in their fingertips, what's going to form after that is going to be scar tissue. Even if it heals up properly. But sanding the fingertips would work for a short period of time, until the stratum basale was able to produce new skin, and then that new skin replaced the older skin. And they would have to sand down to the dermis, to the connective tissue layer, which is where, so it would, they would have to sand down until their fingers bled. All right, skin color. So the topic of skin color, we have many, many, many different skin colors, and even within the different colors, we have different skin tones. So the primary pigments that influence skin color are called keratin and melanin. And melanin is a brown pigment, can be very dark brown, but it can also have some red brown in it. Keratin, as you might expect, is an orange yellow pigment, the same orange yellow pigment that you find in yellow and orange vegetables, carrots and squash and sweet potatoes. But this pigment accumulates in epidermal cells, not in the dermis, and can be converted into vitamin A, which is good for your eyes. So that's why they say carrots are good for your eyes. But anyway, keratin will influence the orangey yellow pigment that you have mixed in with the type of melanin that you have. So I learned about keratin when I started feeding my little boy when he was a baby. I started feeding him sweet potatoes and carrots, baby food. He was kind of light colored, and his skin turned a yellowish color. I was afraid he was jaundiced, and then someone told me that carrots and sweet potatoes could cause that. So it wouldn't have been noticeable to everyone, but I'm his mom, so it was noticeable to me. But there are two types of melanin. There is actually a red yellow melanin and a brown black melanin, and both are made by melanocytes. And so it's that combination plus the combination of carotene that determines your skin color. Melanin is stored in vesicles called melanosomes. And they enter cells of the stratum basale, which means melanocytes are located in the dermis, in the upper dermis. They are not located in the epidermis. These are cells of the dermis, the connective tissue below the epidermis. So melanosomes, those vesicles that contain melanin, enter the cells of the stratum basale, coloring the epidermis. In response to sunlight or ultraviolet radiation exposure, which can include tanning beds as well, the melanin absorbs the UV radiation, and that protects the DNA and the deeper layers of the epidermis and the dermis, protecting the skin from cancer. But obviously, too much ultraviolet radiation will cause will cause skin cancer. So melanocytes look like this. They are located in the dermis, and what happens is the tips of the melanocytes pinch off and form melanosomes. And those melanosomes move up through the epidermis, starting with the stratum basale, and deposit pigment into the epidermal cells. Now, something else that can influence the tone, the skin tone, not the color, but the tone, is your blood circulation. So some people have more of a red pigment, a red tone to their skin, and other people have more of a yellow tone to their skin. So oxygenated blood is bright red. It is not blue. I don't care what you have heard. Oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood are both red, but they are different colors. Oxygenated blood is bright red, and then deoxygenated blood is a dark brick red. So an increase in body temperature will dilate your superficial blood vessels. That means the blood vessels in your skin, in the dermis of your skin, and this will result in a flushed red skin color. Sometimes we call this blushing. But it can also be caused from exercising. And we can turn pale whenever those same blood vessels constrict. And that can happen when you're frightened, when you just hear some terrible news. Sometimes people will turn pale because all of a sudden their blood vessels constrict, their blood pressure drops, their blood vessels constrict, and it can come from a lot of different things, but mainly, something shocking, something that surprises you or shocks you to the point that, it feels like, how do you say it? It feels like the blood rushes from your face. Now, when a person is dying, their skin in certain areas will undergo cyanosis, which is a bluish coloration around the lips, around the fingernails and the toenails. And this is because the blood oxygen supplies are diminished. This can happen in an asthma attack. It can happen when you climb a mountain like Mount Everest, not the North Carolina mountains, but really tall mountains. And it can happen if, if you're dying, if you have stopped breathing. Two pigments in the epidermis are melanin and carotene. Exposure to sunlight darkens the skin because it increases the production of melanin, Why does the skin of a light-skinned person